we'll move on to the next speaker. I'd like to introduce Shari Egeland. She is currently the Associate Director and Research Specialist and past Prevention Coordinator and Youth ATOD Prevention Counselor at Omni Youth Programs in Sacramento, California. She has over 20 years training and teaching professionals, teens, young adults, parents, and families on alcohol, tobacco, and other drug prevention and other topics. She has presented and has been a guest panelist as a marijuana prevention expert at over 15 summits and conferences. Shari's educational background includes an MS in counseling, MFT from Sac State University in 2000, graduating with honors, and a BA in psychology from the same institution. So Shari knows stingers up. And so with that, we'll welcome Shari on how to talk to youth about opioids and the dangers of fentanyl.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I so appreciate that. And thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's just some great information, and just props to Laura for being so brave and so wonderful sharing your story here today. It was really, I felt honored to be present for that. So here's my screen. Let's see if I can get it. Does everybody see? Thumbs up? Good, good. All right. So yes, I'm Shari Egeland, the Associate Director at Omni Youth Programs. There's my email. It's pretty simple, shari@omniyouth.net. I can make this presentation available. I'll send that off if you guys want to just make that available to all the members of the coalition, because there are some links for resources on here that you might find useful. But you're also welcome to email me directly if there's any of the images or handouts or anything you'd like me to send you directly, or just send you a copy of the presentation. I can do that. We do specialize in doing presentations. I've been mostly via Zoom lately, just like with everybody. Have done a few in person, but I've been in a few people's living rooms as well and jumped into meetings. So if you're a member of another organization or group, or just, in your personal life, would like to host something, I'd be happy to come and do that. There's my email. Just a little background on Omni Youth Programs. We've been around since 1979. We are local here in Sacramento, California. We are one of the prevention agencies that's funded by the county, and we primarily focus on preventing marijuana and alcohol, although, as everybody knows, and I'm so glad, again, thank you for having me, opioids is becoming a very dangerous, and a lot of kids don't get a second chance to say no when it comes to especially fentanyl. So thanks for having us. A little shout out to our funders. If you would like me to come, or any of us at Omni, to do a presentation, we do come out for free, thanks to our funders, Substance Use Prevention and Treatment Services. We're very thankful to them. First, I'm going to start out talking about why, especially in prevention, the young years are so important. A lot of the stats we saw are young people being affected by this. But as you know, a lot of those that work in recovery and prevention and things like that, most addiction does start in the teenage years. We tend to think of addiction as an adult issue because that's when people tend to seek recovery. But it turns out most people that are dealing with addiction later in life started out at a very young age. Actually, about 90% of them start in the teenage years. So these are really crucial years. Really, we kind of focus on those, 8th grade all the way to about 17 or 18. But it's important to understand, especially when it's with opioids, there is a misperception from teens and unfortunately parents that it's safer to use a prescription than it is to use what they call street drugs. And as we heard from some of the previous speakers, it looks like a pill that came from a doctor, but it is a street drug a lot of the times, especially when it's deadly. So this is kind of a misperception that we are at Omni really working hard to kind of overcome, to let people know, unless you are at the pharmacy getting the prescription directly because of what your doctor gave you, it is not safe, and sometimes even more dangerous than some of the other street drugs that are out there. It's an especially important time. I always, when I'm out talking to parents and people that work with young people, I say, the teenage brain is like a Mack truck with bicycle brakes. And I say this because where they are in development, our brain grows till about we're 25. And the teen years are a time when the part of the brain that really is adventurous and wants to try new things and is just, hey, why not? Let's do it, is just thriving. But the prefrontal cortex part that says, whoa, wait a minute, let's think about what the consequences of this might be, is not developed yet. It's still developing. So that's why I tell young people, you need adults in your life. If you go on YouTube and see somebody jumping their bike off a roof, it's not usually a middle-aged person doing that. It's usually a teen. And that's because they have that, hey, let's try it, why not? And the consequences, again, their brain is not able to really do that yet. So that's why it's good news, regardless of the eye rolls. I know I have a teen myself and work with teens forever. They actually care about what adults think, especially parents. Studies over and over and over again say kids are much less likely to use. This is specifically with prescription or opioids, 50% less likely to use. But the bad part is only about 22% of kids say their parents have actually talked to them about this. And as Laura said earlier, you don't necessarily have to wait for a sign or something, because there's not always the sign. That's why she's so brave in getting out there and telling parents, talk about this early, often, because it's not just prescription studies over and over. This is a really big study that they compared all the way from 2003 to 2017, asking young people from, depending on the study, it was anywhere from like 13 to about 18 years old, who was their number one influence on whether or not they're drink. Well, parents just skyrocketed. And again, if you are a parent of a teen, you might be like, I don't think so, but it's true. True of marijuana as well. High school students who think their parents don't feel it's wrong, they're more likely to use. And not just their parents, those adults that are in their community. I know we talked about norms, what's kind of normal now. If kids think that something is normal, like marijuana use in this study, they're more likely to do it. We have to kind of help them understand what that risk is. Another thing that's important to point out is marijuana especially tends to be kind of, they always known for years it's a gateway drug. But this is from a really good organization called SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. And really marijuana to heroin, marijuana to painkillers, all kinds of stuff, there is a real direct link. And that's why we primarily focus on the prevention of marijuana and alcohol, because we feel like if we can prevent those drugs from happening at a younger age, there's a better chance of stopping more serious opioid and prescription drug misuse later on. As far as where teens are getting their medication, according to SAMHSA, they are getting them from home, like through a friend or a relative for free. Again, not being charged for this. Either that, or a lot of them are still getting a prescription from a doctor. This is important to note, because we're assuming that with all the news out there, that the prescriptions and doctors giving out stuff like that is going down. But according to them, it's not. Only less than 7%, 6.2% got it from actually a drug dealer or somebody they didn't know. This is interesting too. This is a data that was just released in 2020. And showed that most of the opioids, most of the time that young people are getting are from dentists. They're the primary prescribers of opioids to adolescents. And not only that, but they found about half of the time that opioids are prescribed by dentists, they're unnecessary and maybe not appropriate. But when young people, especially adolescents, are getting opioids, at least this study showed it was from their dentist. So that might be something to think about, a campaign maybe targeted directly at dentists or something, especially when it comes to prescribing to adolescents. So talking to teens. So Lori, thank you so much for inviting me, asked me to come and just give some basic tips on talking to teens, especially about opioids and some of the dangers. The biggest thing I tell parents is, it's not just one big talk, the talk. It's lots of little talks frequently, as much as you can, age appropriate ones as well. Start young for sure. But sometimes connecting's easier when you're not like actually sitting, like a counselor or something, like when you're driving or when you're doing chores or shopping or doing things like that. Those are great opportunities for those little mini conversations. Maybe you hear something on the radio and kind of want to talk about it. Those are a great opportunity to do that. Take advantage of those times. Talk about, maybe somebody in your family was prescribed opioids or had an accident, or you help pick somebody up from the hospital and saw that. Talk about that. What the prescription is, what it's for, how they should be careful with it, the proper way to dispose of it. It's a great opportunity to kind of model and kind of talk about why those are provided, what they do, and the safe way to use them. Another thing is really use the media out there, because we know young people, right? They're looking at a screen most of the time. So you can take advantage of that as a parent. I try to sit down and watch whatever TV shows my daughter is streaming, or whatever she's doing. And anytime there's something that happens with a character in a show, or something comes out of the media about an overdose, those are really good opportunities to talk about that. What do you think about that? What's going on there? There's a couple pictures here. Michael K. Williams was just one of the most recently actors who unfortunately overdosed. It was an opioid due to fentanyl. There's a picture from the Angels out of Major League Baseball. One of my favorite people in the world, Prince, unfortunately passed away. So just take those opportunities to talk about that, how that happened. They call it an accidental overdose a lot of times, because the person did not intend. They just maybe took a pill but as Mr. Ott was saying, it was laced with something, and they didn't know. But we need to tell teens that as much as we can. There's a really cool toolkit from Operation Prevention that's specific when it comes to opioids. And they have some discussion starters that are available. Like, hey, I want to start talking about this, but what's the first thing I say? Because you don't want to say, I want to talk to you about drugs, because maybe that would be kind of a turn off immediately. But they give some really good examples about how to do that. And not only that, but it has information, because I always tell parents, before you kind of start a conversation, do your best to educate yourself as much as you can, so that maybe you can give little tidbits of information. We found in the field of prevention that what they call scare tactics aren't, 100%. You don't want to be like, you're going to die if you do this. I will say with opioids, though, it's a little different, because whereas a kid's not going to believe you if you say, if you have a beer, you're going to die. If you smoke a joint, you're going to die. But with opioids, you actually it could take just one pill, because of the small amount of fentanyl that it does take. So the conversation is changing. Another thing that we find is really powerful is not just telling teens, but asking teens, listening to them, and asking their opinion on things. Why do you think people use drugs? How come there's been so many overdoses in our community? What do you think about that? And asking them for advice, like, hey, somebody at work, if I had somebody at work that was overdosing, overusing, what do you think I should do? And we can learn from them. I'm going to share something at the end of the presentation that we learned from young people through the Sacramento County Coalition for Youth. One of the dangers out there that I didn't know about. I'm going to share that in a little bit. But it's good to learn what's going on, what they know, and what's happening directly around them with their friends and at their school. Another thing that you can do as a parent, this can be kind of fun, but have practice, like you pretend that, like, say you're a friend and you're pressuring them to use a substance, no matter what it is, and have them practice what they're going to say back to you, like real time, kind of like, like they're on Saturday Night Live or something, or, just kind of ad-libbing stuff. But this is something that we do with young people when we do presentations. We have them come up in front of the group and practice what we call keeping it real. You refuse, you say, no thanks, that's not for me. You explain why you don't want to do it. And we give them some funny, sometimes it's good to be funny in these situations to get yourself out of it. Like, oh, I got to drive my mom's to bingo later, or no, I got brain surgery tomorrow, or, something like that. But it could be realistic too. Like, hey, I got a game this weekend, I can't mess with that. And then suggest an alternative, like, hey, I got this new game at home. You want to come over and play it? Or, hey, let's fix this playlist I'm doing right now. It's, just try to change the subject. And then again, letting them know the importance of leaving or walking away if their friend is unfortunately still going to engage in that behavior. Because we all know as adults that even if you yourself choose to stay away from something dangerous, if you're with somebody who's doing something dangerous, that can affect you pretty heavily. So making sure they understand the importance of walking away. And now I'm just going to go over some of those hidden dangers that we learned about that I talked about a second ago. The Sac County Coalition for Youth, which we would love for you all to be a member of. Lori has that information. We did a listening circle at our last meeting before last, and just asked young people what's going on, how are things post COVID, and what's going on with drug trends. Well, we learned some interesting stuff from them. Again, I'll share that later. It is important for parents to know what drug paraphernalia looks like, because it is changing, and it is amazing the creativity of some of these people in marketing. Omni, we do offer a presentation called Hidden in Plain Sight. When things were more in person, we actually set up a mock teenager's bedroom with some of the items that are used to kind of cover up, and again, hidden in plain sight. It is something that I can do. I have done a couple webinars on it, but staying up to date as much as possible is really important. There's a good resource on getsmartaboutdrugs.gov. It's a prescription for disaster is what they call it. It's a little kit. And I like how they really lay out kind of what the different pills look like. I tell parents, you can always Google it. You could literally put in, small round orange pill with the number 40 on it. And a lot of times Google will tell you what it is. But it has all different forms. And not just that, it does have some solutions on there too, how to talk to teens about stuff. So that's a really good resource. And I always tell parents, when in doubt, test. And this is, some people have different feelings about this. I definitely leave that up to you as a parent and you as adults, whether or not you want to do this. But when in doubt, test. It's something, again, as a parent, especially now with how dangerous things can be. This is an example of one that's available at Target, but they're on Amazon and at Walmart. And it's just a urine test, and you can do it right at home, and it lets you know if there's something that you maybe need to be concerned about. So it is a resource that I share with parents if they just can't get their kids to talk, but they're pretty sure something's going on. It can be kind of sticky, so I try to have them ask for help from a professional of some sort, maybe when they're doing this, but it is a resource that's out there. Another thing that we always share with parents is the importance of locking our pill bottles, because some parents, especially older adults, do actually need opioids. And Amazon has a ton of these things. Pill Pod is really popular, even just a little box with a little combination on it. And even if you think, oh, my kid wouldn't use my stuff, I say, well, it's still a good idea to do this, because that really sends the message home to them that this is dangerous. We lock up our guns. We lock up our opioids as well. We lock away our prescription meds, because these are dangerous. So even if it's something you think, oh, my kid would never do that, that's awesome. But again, it really kind of drives home that message to them and their friends if they happen to spot it in the bathroom. This is something serious that needs to be protected. And fentanyl, like we said, I won't talk too much about this because I know people before us have talked about that. But really, especially when it comes to fentanyl, a straightforward conversation that really now, if you're getting a prescription pill from somewhere besides directly from the pharmacist, it is like playing Russian roulette. It's an experiment that even if 4 people before you take it and they're fine, the one you take could be the one that has that fatal mixture. And really frank talks with young people tend to work with this. I did a presentation for, again, a living room presentation, we call it, where a parent hosted a webinar through Zoom for her teenagers and cousins and friends. And I told a story about how I was just at a volleyball game, my daughter's volleyball game, and one of the parents is a nurse. And she told me how she was really, I could tell something was wrong. And so I said, what's going on? And she said, oh, last night we had a group of 5 20, 21-year-olds come in, and they had talked one of their friends who doesn't do drugs or anything into, hey, just try this little drop of this fentanyl stuff. They didn't say it was fentanyl, but it was, into your Coke and Coca-Cola, sorry, not this Coke, a drink. And out of 5 of them, they all overdosed, went to the ER room. 4 of them woke up and were fine. The one that didn't want to do it and was pressured the most actually was brain dead. And she talked to me about how tragic that was. So I shared that story because I did the webinar right after. And then the parent who was hosting it, it was so good, told me that the next day at school, one of the teenagers that attended was actually offered something and remembered that story that I told. And so she said no directly because of that story. So sometimes, especially when it comes to fentanyl, where we don't like to use scare tactics too much when it comes to prevention, because that just makes teens kind of turn off. With fentanyl, that's a different story. I don't know how many of you saw in the news, like some of these, again, with Mr. Ott shared these, but this is lovely. What you're looking at here is actually Jolly Ranchers wrappers, and they put in them gummy bears that are laced with fentanyl. This actually is out of Carolina, over in Georgia, actually happened in Georgia. They were seized, thankfully, by law enforcement. But so I tell kids, even be careful taking things like anything that could be an edible or candy or something like that, especially if it looks fishy. And just being really careful to know you can't always tell what is fake and what is real. The M30 that you're looking at there, one of those is fake, one of them is real. And if somebody didn't tell me, I couldn't tell which was which for sure. Here's the hidden danger that we were told about by the youth at the Sac County Coalition. Social media is a place, everybody knows, that teens are on all the time, but it can be a tremendous resource for good and a tremendous resource for not great. Believe it or not, teenagers will brag about their drugging a lot of times on their Instagrams, or TikToks is a really big one, posting pictures. So being aware of what's happening on your child's phone is super important. I'll share some resources of how you can do that in a minute. Whoops, went too far. This is what we heard about at the coalition. The way that a lot of young people are getting drugs through the mail, because we wondered with COVID, they're not at school, they're not interacting with friends, how are they getting it? Well, this is how. People put videos on TikTok. I just did some screenshots. I don't have the actual video here, but this is where you can see this person is rolling up a vape item. This was THC vape in this video. They put it at the bottom of the box, cover it up, and then put a bunch of candy on top of it, so that if a parent or somebody opened and looked at it, they would just think, oh, they just got this, sometimes there's a subscription boxes for like comic books or, Bath and Body stuff. They just think it's something like that. Here's another one where the person disguised it, sent it inside bedroom slippers with sleep masks. So it just looks like a friend maybe sent them this great little care package or something. It's kind of scary how deep that they go into this stuff. But that's why things like apps that monitor social media are so important. I put a little link there that parents or adults can use for some apps for parents. Most of them are free. Bark is the one that I hear most about, especially when I go to conferences and law enforcement is talking about social media safety. Bark is the one they talk about the most. And what Bark does is you can link that to your child's phone, and Bark stays up to date on the trends and the special terms and stuff that people use on social media to sell stuff, like you were seeing in the previous slides. And they put an alert on the parent's phone to let them know. So that's a really good resource. It's really important. I tell parents you need to let young people know what an overdose looks like and what to do if that happens. So going over, the extreme, the bluish skin, the pinpoint pupils, not being able to wake up is really important. And sharing with them the Good Samaritan Law, because most of the time, people at a party or around friends don't get help because they're afraid of getting in trouble. Well, I make sure they know about the Good Samaritan Law, which says basically, if somebody you think is having an overdose, even if you're underage or using the substance, whether it be alcohol, marijuana, or opioids, if you think they're overdosing or something's wrong, if you call 911 and stay with the person till help arrives, then legally, technically, you're not supposed to get in any trouble. So I really tell young people about this. Most, I don't think I've ever talked to a young person who knows about this. They always are surprised to hear this. So we really kind of go through with the importance of knowing these things. So I'm just going to wrap up here and leave you with some resources. What you're looking at here, there's actually a two-sided postcard that we developed through the Sac County Coalition for Youth. And it just talks about, questions to ask before taking opioids. I can send this directly to you through a PDF, or we also at Omni, and I know through the coalition, have some of these already made up if you want these postcards available. Again, I know communications mostly through the internet now, so I can send those to you. There's also a really good program called Stop Opioid Silence that's really kind of into it in terms of social media and stuff, which is great with kids. They have different filters. People share their stories about this. It's a really good one. Also, there's for younger kids, Scholastic has a free over-the-counter medicine safety program for young kids that's available there. That's a really great resource. And I don't know how many of you know about the Rescue Agency, but this basically, Jeffrey Jordan started this. And what they are, they're a marketing firm, but they market not for products or goods. They market for behavior change. That's all they do. And it's quite amazing what they've been able to accomplish. And so I really suggest kind of watching this. I watched it, our executive director, Cynthia, and I watched this. It's really pretty good about some of the common mistakes that have been made in the past for opioid misuse prevention campaigns, and what they have learned is a little bit more effective. At Omni, we do have some stuff coming up that I would love to, because the biggest thing that we're finding with young people, I'm doing this mental health hacks webinar coming up soon via Zoom. And really what I do here is talk to young people about the dangers of using drugs for anything in particular, especially a mental health use, how drugs can really actually cause more harm than good. We are doing a free model program training. If those of you work with families, and again, a lot of people aren't getting to programs now, this is a program that the family does on their own in their home. It's an evidence-based model program, and you can contact me. Here's some other really good resources about how to protect kids from buying meds online, alternatives to opioids, and again, that are linked to that opioid toolkit that I talked about earlier. And this I can't recommend enough. This is from SAMHSA. It's called the Talk They Hear You app. And it's a free app that parents can actually get on their phone. And this is what it looks like. It basically gives you tips on not only what to say, but times. Like, here's something to say to start a discussion. And there's avatars and you can practice. But this is a free app that honestly, I think every parent should have on their phone. And feel free to check out omniyouth.net. We have a lot of resources that are downloadable. And again, I can send you anything here that you've seen that you like. And thank you so much for allowing me the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Shari, for all that information, great information. And I just wanted to let everyone know that we will send a follow-up email with links to all of these presentations.
Great.
A lot of great information.
Yeah. So any questions or anything? I'm trying to get myself there. There we go.
Just looking. Just a comment that BART currently does not interface with Snapchat. That our parents are working to change that.
That's good to know.
There was an earlier comment. Somebody was asking, excuse me, are there any harm reduction methods that Omni takes in our approach to teens? For example, to make sure teens know the importance of not driving after drinking, etc.
We do. We actually, one of the presentations that we've done both in person and online is how to party safe. So we talk about if you want to go to a party and still be social and have fun, what are some steps you can take to do that and make sure that you're making good decisions, but still kind of cool and still able to have fun. And that's kind of where we get into some of that stuff, especially driving. What do you do if your ride, is drunk or you suspect is having some trouble? And that we talk to parents too about making a plan for that, figuring out with their young people before they go. We have some videos on our YouTube channel that address exactly that. If you go to YouTube and just type in Omni Youth Programs, there's some free 3 to 5 minute videos for parents, what to do when your teen's going to go to a party. And there's a couple there directly for the teens, what to do, if you want to go to a party, but you don't want to participate in any of drug taking or anything like that. What are some things that you can do? So feel free to check those out.
Okay.
Sherry, I just have one more comment before we move on. I want to make sure in our prevention programming and messaging that we make the distinction that Laura Didier talked about, the difference between a kid who, takes a pill one time and it's a lethal pill versus somebody who's an ongoing opioid user or polysubstance user, and really changing our language and utilizing poisonings and talking about, opioid poisoning versus opioid addiction, or, use or misuse. There's lots of different terminologies that we use. But I want to make sure that we are being mindful of the different types of kids that we're talking about here.
For sure. And I thank you for saying that, Lori, because I did want to mention too, it gets a little tricky in terms of especially prevention, because when we talk about marijuana and alcohol, we can kind of really hope for abstinence with that, right? Because technically they're legally not supposed to use, but opioids are different. There might be a time when they do have to, legally have a severe injury or something going on, and how that can develop. Like Lori said, it's not always like, oh, you're going to take a pill and then something's bad's going to happen. But even if you do get it from the pharmacist, how that can develop into something, an addiction, and how that looks too. That's that. Thank you for saying that, Lori. I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again,